Let me start this a little differently. This isn't a hype speech, and it's not another prediction video about lines on a chart. This is a conversation about psychology, discipline, and the part of the trade almost nobody prepares for. Everyone loves talking about the war. Very few people prepare for what happens after you win it. For years, many of you have done the unglamorous work. You've read the CFTC reports when nobody else cared. You watched JP Morgan flip their positioning. You paid attention to industrial demand quietly tightening while paper markets played games. You stacked silver at $20, $25, $30, and you held through brutal smashes that were designed to make you quit. You didn't quit. That already puts you ahead of the crowd. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The most dangerous threat to your success is not a central banker, not a bullion bank, not Jamie Dimon or Jerome Powell. The biggest risk in this entire setup is the person staring back at you in the mirror. Winning is one thing. Surviving winning is something else entirely. Everyone thinks they know what they'll do when silver finally breaks free. They imagine happiness, relief, vindication. But history tells us something very different. Extreme wealth creation often triggers extreme panic. There's a word for it. Vertigo. When numbers on a screen suddenly become life-changing, the rational part of your brain steps aside and the lizard brain takes over. It doesn't whisper, it screams. Sell, lock it in, secure the profit. In that moment, that impulse, is how wealth is stolen from you a second time. Banks suppress prices on the way down, and then they use psychology to shake you out on the way up. This is where anchor bias comes in. Your brain is anchored to silver being cheap. $30 feels normal. $50 feels expensive because you remember 1980 and 2011. Those numbers are burned into collective memory. So when silver hits $60, your instinct will be to say, this is a bubble. This can't last. That reaction is not insight. It's conditioning. Selling there is the financial equivalent of ejecting from the plane right after takeoff. It feels safe, but it guarantees you miss the destination. In a hyperinflationary reset, $50 isn't the ceiling, it's the floor. Adjust silver's 1980 high using the CPI metrics from that era, not the sanitized version we're fed today. And the real high isn't $50, it's hundreds of dollars, somewhere in the $600 to $800 range. Selling at $60 isn't prudent. It's handing back a scarce strategic asset for pennies on the dollar to institutions that are desperate to get it from you. The first spike is never the end game. We've seen this movie before. Look at GameStop. Look at Volkswagen in 2008. The initial move is shorts covering. The real move happens later when the float disappears, when nobody is selling. When the price has to go to absurd, almost offensive levels just to pry supply loose. That's when price discovery actually begins. Ask yourself a serious question. If you sell silver at $100, what did you really accomplish? You traded a finite industrial metal for fiat currency that can be created in infinite quantities. You jumped out of the lifeboat and climbed back onto the Titanic because the buffet looked nice. It's a terrible trade, even if it feels good in the moment. This is why the exit is harder than the entry. Buying is easy. You click, you stack, you wait. Selling requires timing, discipline, and a plan made in advance. Without a plan, you will panic. You'll either sell too early and regret it for the rest of your life, or you'll hold blindly and ride a violent correction back down because you never define success. Volatility is not a bug in this trade, it's the feature. Study 1980. The Hunt Brothers squeeze didn't move in a straight line. Silver went from $6 to $50, but along the way it dropped 20% in days. Those drops weren't signals that the move was over. They were washouts designed to shake out weak hands. The people who sold those dips missed the final surge. Expect the same playbook. When silver hits $75 or $80, there will be a smash. Paper will be dumped. Price will drop hard, maybe back to $60. Headlines will declare the squeeze over. Commentators will laugh. This is not proof of failure. If the vaults are still empty and industrial demand is still starving, that drop is a bear trap. The fundamentals don't disappear just because a screen turns red. You must learn to separate price from value. Price is what flashes on your phone. Value is what the metal does in the real world. In a currency crisis, price goes to infinity by definition. That doesn't mean you never exit. It means you change the denominator. You don't sell silver for dollars. You swap silver for assets. That distinction will determine whether you preserve purchasing power or become a paper millionaire who can afford less every year. Selling for cash and parking it in a savings account during inflation is how gains evaporate quietly. 6 months later, you'll have more digits and less buying power. That's the cruel joke of hyperinflation. The real objective is moving up the asset pyramid. You move from a volatile squeeze trade into something stable and productive. Land, gold, businesses, things that generate value instead of bleeding it. This is how dynastic wealth is built. Not Lambos, not boats, not dopamine purchases that impress strangers and bankrupt families. Lottery winners follow emotion. Serious people follow structure. Rule number 1, never sell 100% at once. ever. Scaling out is not optional, it's survival. If you have 1,000 ounces and silver hits $100, maybe you sell 100 ounces. Cover your initial cost, eliminate fear. Now you're playing with house money, stress drops, decisions improve. If silver goes to zero, you lost nothing. If it goes to $500, you're still in the trade. But again, sell for what? This is where professionals stop looking at dollar prices and start watching ratios. Specifically, the gold to silver ratio. Right now, it takes roughly 80 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. That's historically extreme. It tells you silver is cheap. When silver runs, it almost always outpaces gold. The ratio collapses. 60 to 1, 40 to 1, 30 to 1. When that ratio compresses, that's your signal. Not headlines, not dollar prices, ratios. When silver becomes expensive relative to gold, you swap. You trade volatility for stability. You convert a speculative gain into sound money. You're not cashing out. You're upgrading. This is how silver squeezes turn into free gold for those who stay disciplined. But none of it works if your mind isn't prepared. The upside panic is real. You will watch your net worth swing by a year's salary in a single day, up $50,000 by morning, down $40,000 by dinner. If that makes you emotional, the market will punish you. Ruthlessly. Detach from the fiat number. 1 ounce is 1 ounce. Until your objective is reached, the dollar price is noise. Freedom doesn't come from collecting more matrix tokens. It comes from stepping outside the system entirely. Write your plan now on paper while you're calm. I will sell 10% at this level. I will swap 20% at this ratio. Make a contract with yourself, because when mania hits, when your Uber driver and your grandmother are suddenly silver experts, you will not be rational. The goal isn't more dollars. The goal is better money. And when the dust settles, the only thing better than silver is gold. Welcome to the ratio trade. Let's talk about something the truly wealthy understand instinctively, but almost nobody explains clearly. This isn't about getting lucky. It's about conversion. It's about using timing, math, and patience to quietly turn one undervalued asset into something far more powerful without adding new capital and without chasing noise. This is the move dynasty builders use when they want to graduate from speculation into permanence. Everything starts with a relationship, not a price. Specifically, the relationship between gold and silver. Right now, that relationship is wildly distorted. The gold to silver ratio sits near 80 to 1, meaning it takes about 80 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. That number alone should make you pause. Historically, it makes no sense. Geologically, silver comes out of the ground at roughly an 8 to 1 ratio. In classical monetary systems, from Rome to early America, the ratio hovered closer to 15 to 1. Even in the modern era, when paper markets distort everything, the long-term average sits around 40 to 50 to 1. So 80 to 1 is not normal. It's an anomaly. And anomalies don't last forever. When silver moves, it doesn't move politely. It's a smaller market, thinner, more emotional, and far more volatile. Gold is the battleship. Silver is the speedboat. When the squeeze begins, gold might double. Silver can quadruple or quintuple in the same window. That's not theory, that's history. Imagine a scenario that isn't extreme, just plausible. Gold moves from $2,500 to $4,500. Respectable, solid, very gold-like. Silver, meanwhile, moves from $30 to $150. Suddenly, the ratio collapses to 30 to 1. Same metals, same ounces, entirely different reality. Now let's put real numbers on this, because this is where the light bulb turns on. At an 80 to 1 ratio, if you hold 1,000 ounces of silver, you can trade it for 12.5 ounces of gold. That's the starting point, nothing fancy. But at a 30 to 1 ratio, that same 1,000 ounces of silver buys you 33 ounces of gold. You didn't earn more money, you didn't take on leverage, you didn't trade harder. You simply waited for the relationship to normalize. 12 ounces becomes 33 ounces. That's not a gain, that's a transformation. This is the quiet magic of the ratio trade. You're not speculating on price, you're arbitraging value. And that distinction is everything. Why make the swap at all? Because silver, for all its beauty and industrial necessity, has a personality problem. It's explosive on the way up and brutal on the way down. It earns its nickname. After every major silver mania, there is a violent correction. Gold, on the other hand, doesn't need drama to function. It holds altitude. It preserves purchasing power. It's boring in the way you want your long-term wealth to be boring. Swapping silver for gold near the peak of a silver mania is how you lock in what you've built without exiting the hard asset universe. You're stepping out of volatility, not out of protection. You're upgrading the form of your wealth. But this isn't something you do impulsively. It requires structure. You watch the ratio obsessively, not the dollar price. You predefine your actions. At 50 to 1, maybe you swap 20% of your silver. At 30 to 1, another 30%. At 15 to 1, which has happened before, you decide whether to finish the trade or keep a core position. If the ratio ever touches 15 again, And yes, it briefly did in both 1980 and 2011. Your 1,000 ounces of silver could buy more than 65 ounces of gold. That's not speculation anymore. That's legacy-level wealth preservation. And remember, you didn't start with gold. You started with silver that may have cost you $30,000 total. This is financial alchemy, not because it's magical, but because most people don't have the patience or emotional control to execute it. There are secondary benefits too, and they matter. In some jurisdictions, swapping bullion for bullion is treated differently than selling for cash. Always consult a tax professional because I'm just a guy on the internet with a calculator and a microphone. But even if taxes apply, paying them to end up holding gold is far superior to paying them to hold rapidly depreciating fiat. Execution is simpler than people think. Dealers do these trades every day. You call your local coin shop or a reputable online dealer and say, I want to trade silver eagles for gold buffaloes, or bars for bars. There will be a spread, yes. But in a collapsing ratio, the spread is background noise. The real obstacle isn't logistics. It's attachment. Silver people love silver. The weight, the shine, the anti-bank energy, the feeling that you're holding something real. All of that is valid. But you cannot fall in love with the vehicle. Silver is the rocket. Gold is the destination. Rockets are amazing, but you don't live in them. There's also a strategic reason to favor gold on the other side of the trade. Central banks aren't buying silver. They're buying gold, aggressively. When the monetary reset eventually crystallizes, it will orbit gold. By swapping into gold, you're aligning yourself with the ultimate insiders. You're front-running remonetization, not reacting to it. Then there is the issue nobody likes to talk about until it's too late. Portability. Silver is valuable, but it's heavy. 1,000 ounces weighs close to 70 pounds. It takes space. It's not subtle. 33 ounces of gold fits in your pocket. In a world of geopolitical instability, portability is not a luxury. It's a form of insurance. This is why the ratio trade is such a clean exit. You're not betting on governments. You're not trusting banks. You are simply moving from something undervalued to something fairly valued when the math tells you to do so. Historically, ratios tend to overshoot. It may go to 20 to 1. It might even flirt with 10 to 1 in a severe shortage. But greed ruins more fortunes than bad analysis. 30 to 1 is an exceptional outcome. Anything below that is a gift. Remember the real goal, not more dollars, but more ounces. If you begin with 1,000 ounces of silver and end with 60 ounces of gold, you've already won the game most people don't even know they're playing. This is how capital rotates at the top. The wealthy don't sell emotionally. They exchange strategically. When one asset becomes expensive, they rotate into something unloved. You're doing the same thing, just on a smaller scale and with better timing. And the math always leads. If silver is $100 and gold is $2,000, that's a 20 to 1 ratio. You swap aggressively. If silver is $100 and gold is $10,000, that's $100 to 1. You don't touch it. Same silver price, completely different decision. The math decides, emotion is irrelevant. That requires discipline. You're essentially betraying your silver stack to secure your family's future. That's a trade worth making, but preservation isn't the final chapter. It's the bridge. Gold holds wealth, it doesn't produce it, and eventually the cycle turns again. Historically, wealth flows from paper to commodities, from commodities to real estate, from real estate to business. We're in the commodities phase now. When commodities peak, interest rates tend to rise, economies slow, and real estate cracks. That's when the real opportunity appears. Picture a not-so-fantastical future. Silver at $150, gold elevated, mortgage rates at 12%, defaults rising, housing prices down 40%, commercial real estate hollowed out, blood in the streets. This is where fortunes are made. You don't buy real estate with dollars, you buy it with ounces. If a house costs $400,000 today and silver's $30, that house costs over 13,000 ounces of silver. In a reset, if that house falls to $300,000 and silver rises to $150, it costs 2,000 ounces, same house, same bricks, 85% cheaper in real terms. That's how the wealthy think. They don't ask, what's the price? They ask, what's the ratio? At some point, the conversation has to move beyond charts and price targets and into real-life decisions. Because when the gold-priced cost of real estate finally collapses to historic lows, that's when theory turns into action. That's when you stop watching and start buying. But before anyone rushes off to Zillow with dollar signs in their eyes, we need to talk about the thing that quietly determines whether this strategy creates freedom or stress, debt. One of the most common questions stackers ask is deceptively simple. When silver spikes, should I just pay off my mortgage? The answer isn't a clean yes or no. It depends on the type of debt you're carrying. If you have a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage locked in at 3%, that loan is not your enemy. Inflation is. In fact, inflation is working for you. Every year that passes, you're paying that mortgage back with dollars that buy less and less. The bank is the one losing purchasing power, not you. In that scenario, paying it off early is usually a mistake, but not all debt is created equal. Variable rate mortgages, credit cards, personal loans, anything with a floating or high interest rate, those are financial handcuffs. Kill them without hesitation. Use the upside from silver to erase them completely. Being debt-free isn't about bragging rights. It's about leverage over your own life. A bank can't threaten you if it has no claim on you. Freedom begins the moment no institution can foreclose on your future. Now let's talk about the silent killer of new wealth, lifestyle creep. When silver prints triple digits, the urge to enjoy it will be intense. New truck, bigger house, boat you'll use twice a year, luxury watch that tells the same time as your phone. These things feel like rewards, but financially they're black holes. They depreciate, they leak value. Trading an appreciating asset for a depreciating one is how generational wealth quietly dies. There's a simple rule that filters out bad decisions instantly. Never buy toys with principal. If you want the truck, fine, but buy it with cash flow, not capital. Use silver or gold to acquire an income-producing asset. Use the income from that asset to pay for the lifestyle. Never eat your seed corn. Farmers understand this instinctively. Investors often forget it the moment adrenaline kicks in. This is where land enters the conversation, and not just suburban real estate, productive land, farmland, timberland, water rights. In a world facing supply chain strain, resource scarcity, and geopolitical tension, land that produces food and controls water is real wealth. Not symbolic wealth, not digits on a screen. Actual, tangible survival value. If you can trade silver for fertile soil and a reliable water source, you've converted a financial hedge into generational security. That decision echoes forward for decades. In a true hyperinflationary environment, money becomes unreliable. Prices stop making sense. But trade never stops. Barter never stops. Someone will always need fuel, food, equipment, labor. 100 ounces of silver for a tractor, 500 ounces for a parcel of land. These transactions may happen entirely outside the banking system. That's not paranoia. That's history. And banks know it. That's why they're buying land themselves. Quietly, aggressively. The question is simple. Do you want to rent from institutions, or do you want to own what sustains you? The silver squeeze, if handled correctly, gives you the capital to opt out of a modern feudal structure. But timing matters. Commodities move fast. Real estate moves slowly. Silver can peak and crash long before housing bottoms. That's why the bridge strategy exists. Silver first, gold second, real estate third. The sequence matters. Step 1, silver explodes and creates excess value. Step 2, you swap into gold to preserve that value and reduce volatility. Step 3, you wait. This is the hardest part. 1 to 2 years later, as higher interest rates bite and defaults rise, real estate prices reset. Step 4, you trade gold for land or income-producing property. That patience is rewarded with sovereignty. This path requires being a contrarian more than once. First, you were early on silver when nobody cared. Then, you resist chasing stocks or crypto while sitting on gold. Then you buy property when headlines scream collapse. That combination is rare, but that's why it works. You don't become wealthy by following the crowd. You become free by ignoring it. Start preparing now. Learn your local market in ounces, not dollars. What does an acre cost in silver today? What does a duplex cost in gold terms? Track those numbers. When the ounce price collapses, not the dollar price, that's your signal. If a property that once cost 10,000 ounces falls to 2,000 ounces, that's an 80% discount in real terms. Same building, same land, different cycle. This is what exit strategy actually means. Not leaving markets forever, but rotating intelligently into the next undervalued sector. It's musical chairs, played at a generational level, and when the music finally stops, you want to be sitting on something solid. Dirt, water, shelter, production. Now we need to address the most uncomfortable question of all. How do you know when it's the top? How do you know whether $100 is just a milestone or the peak before a collapse? Perfect timing is impossible, but recognizing mania is not. There are warning signals that repeat every cycle. The first is the media pivot. When mainstream financial outlets that mocked silver for years suddenly embrace it, that's not validation. That's distribution. And when talking heads start shouting buy silver on television, insiders are already exiting. They need public buyers to sell into. Media enthusiasm is not your friend at the end of a trade. The second signal is the everyday expert phenomenon. When your barber, dentist, Uber driver, or cousin who's never opened a balance sheet starts giving you silver advice, the trade is mature. When people with no exposure suddenly feel urgency, the smart money is already moving out. If your grandmother asks how to buy a silver ETF, congratulations, you're late in the cycle. The third signal is parabolic exhaustion. Healthy bull markets move like stairs, surge, pause, digest. Manias go vertical, straight up. When price starts doubling in days, not months, that's not strength. That's fragility. Eiffel Tower charts collapse as fast as they rise. Then comes the bull trap. After the first violent drop, price bounces. Hard. Social media screams, buy the dip. But if fundamentals have shifted, if ratios have flipped, or shortages have eased, that bounce is a trap. It's designed to create bag holders. Watch the commercial traders. Watch the CFTC data if it's still relevant. If the banks flip back to net short at elevated prices, follow their actions, not their commentary. Another overlooked signal is physical premiums. During a squeeze, premiums explode. Spot might be $50 while physical trades at $80. Near the top, something strange happens. Premiums compress. Dealers are flooded with sellers. Coin shops stop buying because inventory is stacked to the ceiling. When the line is out the door with people trying to sell, the move is over. The most dangerous emotion at the top is greed disguised as confidence. You'll feel brilliant, invincible. You'll calculate how much richer you'll be if it goes just a little higher. That's the moment discipline matters. Stick to your plan. If your plan says sell or swap at a ratio of 31, do it. Don't negotiate with the market. Selling slightly early is not failure. It's professionalism. If you sell at $90 and it goes to $100, you still won. If you wait for $110 and it collapses to $50, you didn't just lose money. You lost opportunity. Leave the last 10% for the next guy. The goal is not perfection, it's survival. Use the regret minimization test. Which outcome would haunt you more? Selling at $100 and watching it run to $150, or not selling at $100 and watching it fall back to $30? One is annoying, the other is devastating. Protect yourself from devastation. And finally, remember why you stacked in the first place. Not for bragging rights, not for screenshots. You stacked for freedom, for insulation against inflation, bank failures, and political risk. If exiting silver allows you to own your home, secure land, and store gold safely, you've already won. The $100 level is more than a number. It's a psychological threshold. Beyond it lies chaos, opportunity, and danger in equal measure. Your exit strategy is the life jacket. Put it on now, not in the storm. Don't sell for fiat unless you're killing toxic debt. Swap for gold when the ratio compresses. Swap for productive land when real estate bleeds. Watch for media mania as your warning flare. We survived the suppression. Now the real challenge is surviving success. Write the plan, know your numbers, stay cold-blooded. I'll see you on the other side.